Well, good afternoon and welcome to our Timoney Tips webinar, a short special webinar on the topic of unlocking high performance through greater self-awareness. If you had the opportunity to join us on Tuesday for our webinar with performance psychologist Caroline Currid, you'll have heard her stressing the importance of self-awareness for any leader striving for higher performance. And as you know, a key goal on the Timoney Advanced Leadership Program is to help leaders make better decisions. So our case discussions that we use in the program are we know are very good at helping to see what influences our decision making. And in the program, IESE Professor Alberto Ribera often comments that, well, the importance that leaders have self-knowledge to help them be better leaders, make better decisions. So that's a reason why in recent years we've made a further effort to help leaders gain greater self-awareness in the course of the program. So understanding our fundamental human characteristics can be key to understanding the why behind certain ways in which we make decisions. So to help you pick up on this, we've invited some guests to join us this afternoon to explain a little bit about this process. In the program, we've included a powerful personal assessment designed by Human Content in Norway to help each person gain that greater self-awareness, see what's helping them and what might be hindering them. And we use it also in the breakout team groups before each case study, again, to see the dynamic of how different personalities, different underlying preferences may influence the way we analyze a case and a discussion. Obviously quite relevant, you can imagine, for management teams. So I wanted to share this experience with you, especially now when leaders are facing challenging times during the lockdown, but also even maybe more challenging ones in the months ahead with the economic repercussions of all of this. So I'm delighted to be joined by our Timoney lead coach, Alan McFarlane, a native of Scotland, where he trained as a lawyer. He's worked internationally as a director with Diageo, where I worked myself, first job. And there he was involved in the design and implementation of major strategic initiatives. This led him eventually to become an international executive coach, working closely with the IESE Business School. So through our close relationship as an associate school with IESE, they kindly introduced us to Alan to help support us with our introducing coaching into the program. We're also joined by two leaders who are currently participating on the 2020 Advanced Leadership Program, which is paused at the moment as we sit out the lockdown, but which we hope to resume fairly soon once it's possible. And they are Professor Michele Miller, who's Dean of Students for NUI Galway. She's been teaching in the School of Political Science and Sociology in Galway since 1998. And in January of 2018, she was appointed head of the School of Political Science and Sociology. She's a professor and was appointed last year to the university management team. So plenty of tricky decisions for universities at the moment that Michele is in the midst of. And we're also joined by David Porter, who is from the Dowds Group, and he's the commercial director for the group. And the Dowds Group is involved in construction here in Ireland and in the UK, and has 20 years experience with the company, and he's been on the board as well. So just to say before we start into the discussion, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you do want to ask questions related to the topic to the panel, we'll take those up in about 20-25 minutes time. So Alan, maybe you could give us a little bit of an overview of the fundamentals behind this approach, and why we're using it on the Advanced Leadership Program.
Happy to do so, Ronan, and thanks very much for the invitation. And welcome everyone to my home here in Barcelona, where we're emerging from lockdown, and we're lucky to have some sunshine today to help us. Just picking up a little bit on what you said, Ronan, I think it's no surprise to anyone when we say the key and the reason why we have this approach within the ALP is because ALP and Timoney, to a large extent, is all about people. And many leaders will say, look, people are our greatest asset. But the thought is, how many leaders are truly adept at maximizing, in the nicest possible way, that asset, caring for it, maintaining it, and using it for the maximum benefit? Now, if we're talking about people as the greatest asset, you know, having and acquiring a really deep understanding of fundamental human characteristics, we think is key. That's not only our own fundamental human characteristics, but those of everyone in our organization. And it really is key to success. And when we talk about decisions, perhaps the first decision that any leader needs to make is how to organize, how to allocate tasks that need done to people to do them. And the main aim, the main support, the main aid of the B5 Plus approach is to provide a way to make that match very, very good. Matching people's naturally produced behaviors with tasks that need those behaviors to be done well. And when you get that match in place, then you know you're moving into 7-7 because you're getting maximum performance and maximum benefit, maximum satisfaction for your people. And if you look at, I'm just going to mention B5 Plus in particular. You know, it's based on the internationally recognized Big Five factor. B5 represents the Big Five factor model. It's got a very rigorous scientific basis, both in its approach, lexical approach, but also in its methodology and its application of statistical analysis, factor analysis models, which leads to a degree of validity and reliability which is unparalleled in the marketplace. And it also is particularly interesting for us in our environment here because it's very much focused on norm groups which comprise business people, you know, executives, international business managers. So it makes it very relevant. And then I think, and I'm just going to add, because I've worked with both parties, that I think the underlying uniting theme between Timoney and human content is a strong ethical basis. Everything is done from an ethical perspective, and I think it's a very strong tie-up. So the B5 Plus is, for all of that, a precision tool. It really enables that match to be done between people and activities. That can be for yourself, looking at the composition of your role, if you're in the right role, but also looking at how you allocate activities amongst your people. And so what do you end up with? In Scotland, we say the double whammy. It's a happy, retained people. And not only people, but high-performing teams, because they're working together incredibly effectively well, covering off every basis that the team together has to do to deliver its agenda. And through every person and through every team, then there's a creation and capture of value at absolutely every point of the value chain. So I'd hold that as a hard-edge, compelling business case for underlying what we do this, why we do this. I'm going to say that, you know, we're all unique and we all have our own fundamental human characteristics. We're composed and made up in different ways, and it is all, believe me, you'll know it, very complex. So the great help that we can get to lever ourselves, the better. Now, we'd also say, look, there's no good or bad, right or wrong set or composition of human characteristics. Everything's marvelous, everything's good. It all occurs absolutely frequently in a functional population. But when we look at different contexts, then we can see, Ronan mentioned it, where the way that we are can sometimes help, we call it a signal of strength in our language, or it can hinder, it can be a watch out. And to the extent that it's a watch out, knowing that already allows us to do something about it. Plug the gap, fill the gap, move something, get some help, delegate, whatever it might be, tactical approaches to make sure that we're really setting ourselves up for success. And, you know, for those who in the last few years of the ALP, you know that the context or purpose which we've tended to look at first is the current job, the day job. This is in the old days of the day job, what it is we do. How are we matched to do that in particular? Or it may be the aspirational job. I would like to be doing that. How am I matched for that? But clearly we've got emerging different contexts. We have the crisis, the COVID crisis. We're all suddenly plunged into it. And again, there's no end of very good recommendations, advice of things that leaders should be doing in order to be effective in these times of crisis, to lead the people through. And, I picked up an article by Andreas von der Heit, the Director of Talent Acquisition at Amazon. And he set out 10, absolutely fine. I mean, get the facts right, have a strategy and plan in place, implement thoughtful, impactful and decisive actions, innovate and experiment, be empathetic and positive, create a safe environment, communicate, collaborate, be prepared for the next time from a crisis management point of view, exercise methods of shared leadership, probably busting through traditional silos. I'm going to say all good stuff, but the question it raised for me was, well, to do all of those things effectively would require a superman or superwoman, or better said, a rubber man or rubber woman, because you'd have to be able to flex your behaviors across so many bases in order to cover off. And I'm sure we are going to hear from Michele and David, but get the facts right. I'm going to use B5 language, is underpinned by a person's position on factor 2. Very, very fact-focused, analytical, objective. And also being empathetic and creating a supporting environment is underpinned by a person's position factor 2, the same factor. And I'm just going to tease a little bit and say Michele and David have got quite different positions in factor 2, and no doubt we'll hear how that plays out in their ability to do some of these interventions well. And to the extent that they're challenged, then what do they do to make sure, in collaboration with another person or constantly dialing up, they can do something? Then, of course, we've got a developing, and I think welcome, it's welcome given where we've come from, additional context, the third context of the new norm. What's that going to be? And therefore, what falls upon the leader? What's the context? Me as a leader, I as a leader, we as leaders, how are we placed to explore what the new norm means for us, to define what the new norm means for us, to execute our way successfully into new norm, and to create that high-performing, focused team that will be the people, the assets that will deliver success in the new norm. And that's a big agenda. And that's covering exploration, it's covering definition, it's covering detailed execution, it's covering all the fantastic principles that Caroline Courage set out in our Tuesday webinar, which is all around about purpose with the team, the process, the overcoming limiting beliefs, the curiosity, the high standards, the communication, valuing self and others. Now, again, that's a whole range of activities. And again, the question is, me being me, how am I helped to deliver some of that? Curiosity for me personally is fine. Process for me personally is not so fine. So how do I make sure that if I'm leading a team, I truly cover off all these pieces? So knowing the base level of where we start from will really help us be the people who will create the high performing team and lead it into the future. So that's really what we're all about. Knowing who we are through self-awareness, finely tuned awareness through the B5+, and then using it to transform the effectiveness of ourselves as leaders. And I'm going to say here, and this is kind of important, that the way we are, our fundamental human characteristics are pretty solid. They're like the big rocks in the seabed. They're formed pretty early in life, by the time we're late teens for sure. They don't really change, but what can change is our effectiveness as a leader to be really transformed by knowing, that's the basis of the self-knowing, knowing ourselves. Then I'm going to say embracing, absolutely loving, acknowledging, valuing ourselves for the way we are, the unique way we are, and then using that unique combination of characteristics in the best possible way to be effective as leaders and to result in maximum happiness, satisfaction of people, and maximum value creation for the enterprise. So that's the route. That's the where we're on. That's the Camino that we initiated in the ALP, and we open the possibility for others to join.
And just, Alan, on that's a very good explanation of it. Briefly, what's the process that people go through to actually get to that level of information?
The
Just
process
briefly, so
involves
before we get into the detail.
Yeah, it's some online work. It takes up to about an hour for someone to do some online work, answering questions primarily, questions designed to tease out the underlying characteristics. Then there's a debrief with a licensed debriefer. We're fortunate to have a cohort of coaches within Timoney, all with the B5 Plus license. So that would typically take 90 minutes to understand who they are, and then do that matching process with whatever varying context they might want to do. And that may then hopefully end up with some key insights and some key actions that the person wants to take forward.
And that context could be obviously the wider context we're talking about here with the crisis and so forth, but also it could be their job that they're currently doing, or maybe in the future are planning to do as part of their leadership role.
Yeah.
Okay.
And depending on demand, the whole process could be done in an elapsed time of a number of days, or a week or so. It's fairly.
So maybe if we come to Michele and David, so you've both gone through this process as part of the Advanced Leadership Program. What maybe Michele, starting with you, just briefly, what's your role and how has this helped in these times that we're in?
Okay, thanks, Ronan. So as Dean of Students, I have kind of overall academic leadership in terms of the student wider experience. The student services team and sports and physical activity would report to me. So for me, I had gone through the B5 Plus with Alan, and Alan is my excellent coach. And we had a session in April, and I got this little present in my inbox, as I call it, where Alan had gone through those 10 key leadership steps and looked at my B5 Plus scores in there in terms of my personality. And as I can say, for me, it was so affirmative in terms of my approach to leading through the crisis. What I found really, really helpful was Alan's ability to look at my signals of strength, so areas that I would be good at, collaborative working, being empathetic, but more importantly, he was able to highlight my watch outs, what I needed to look for, what I needed to be careful of. I wouldn't be great at facts and figures. I wouldn't be open to blue sky thinking, but that was counterbalanced by the fact that I am a very collaborative person, and I had created teams with the blue sky thinkers, with the people who were more interested in facts and figures. So for example, one of the things that we discovered was that over 2,000 of our students remained on in Galway. And it began to slowly emerge that some of them were self-isolating and were unwell. And whereas for me, my innate response was to reach out to those students individually, to call them, to see how they were doing, what could we do to help them. Somebody else on the team said, well, I wonder how many we have left in Galway. And then we did a survey and discovered we'd over 2,000 students remaining. So, it just, for me, that session with Alan and getting the document, it was just so affirming and reassuring to me about what I was doing well, but what I needed to watch out for. Again, visibility, the fact that I could be very soft in my communication, which is not really an appropriate thing at this time, that I need to be visible, but that I also need to be very, very clear in how I communicate. So for me, I had, found the B5 Plus to be very, very helpful prior to the situation we're in now, but this level of analysis was just so, so helpful, really, in terms of affirming what I'm doing right, but alerting me to what I need to watch out for. So that has been an experience.
Would you say you were aware of some of those watch outs in advance, or has this been a bit more of an insight into that you weren't as clear about them?
It's been much more of an insight into it, Ronan, because it's been very specific in terms of dealing with a crisis management situation. So, in my initial work with Alan, yes, I was aware of them, but whereas this really led to applying it, and the importance of applying it. But also, I wasn't as aware of, I suppose I didn't appreciate my strengths as much. until I got engaged in this, and I could really see, you know, it affirmed to me what I bring to this role, and what I bring, and how I can exploit that at this time as well.
Right.
So it was really reaffirming, because, you know, that was one of the things I said to Alan as well, is that very often as senior leaders, we're very mindful of telling our colleagues that they're doing a great job and that they're appreciated. That doesn't always happen at the senior level. You're expected to do a great job, or you'll be told that you're not. So it was so affirming. It really was affirming that my approach, my style has value at a time like this.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Well, David,
maybe just jump in and comment quickly, because Michele gave me permission to share. I remember in the very first session, Michelle's got a position on factor one, which is probably not necessarily putting herself out there in the spotlight. Can be happy, own company, second plane. And I've seen Michelle's agenda. It's committee meeting after committee meeting after committee meeting after committee meeting. And she's also extremely caring, considerate, empathetic, and I remember you saying, Michele, look, actually factor one left is the reason why I really don't like my job all that much, but factor two right is the reason why I do it. Yeah, and that was it was your choice, your sacrifice, in a sense, to prioritize one match over another for your overall satisfaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a real eye-opener to me in terms of what was draining the energy from me in terms of the factor one. But then with the nature of the job that I do, I think, yes, somebody, you know, factor two was very, very well suited to it. So for me, prior to this, that's what I was working on, is how can I, you know, make myself comfortable in the position that I'm in with the personality that I have. And then this happened.
Very good. Very good. Well, David, could we go over to you and briefly maybe explain what you do and how this has helped you in this period?
So thanks very much. My role in the company has sort of morphed. It's now commercial director, but I'm also part of the overall sort of leadership team within the company. So I suppose there's that joint thing of the base of my job is about facts and numbers, but people's obviously critical to it. And I suppose during the crisis and with the B5, that's the thing that for me was probably the biggest standout, where I'm the fact focused, between myself and Michele, I'm the fact focused one. So I'm the one that likes the numbers, and but that real emphasis on people being number one. So as a company, we're very much a people first company, but that trying to find that balance was really important. So I suppose whenever you're giving people direct information, that's good, but people need more than that. And that's what I found, that getting facts for the majority of people probably just isn't enough. They need to be given reassurance. They need to be talked through. They maybe have scenarios that they want to talk through that are important to them. And in my brain, I may be sitting saying, yeah, but that's not right. But the reality is that it's really important for people to be able to talk that through and to understand for themselves, and use their line managers, their managers as sounding boards sometimes. And then, or maybe having that information level where instead of it being at that sort of macro level, here's the company position, it's chatting to people and bringing it down where you're able to understand, or they're able to understand what it means to them personally. So I suppose one of the things that I had from the sort of B5 and the conversations on was just that understanding that my facts first, people focus maybe slightly a bit of a watch out for me, and it was good to be able to use that and leverage that. I think the other thing that came out for me was having a reasonable level of calmness, but also being reasonably optimistic and an outlook as well as part of the personality traits that I have. So that actually helped with the people-focused piece whenever we were in, as part of this crisis, because that's having that relative level of calmness whenever maybe others weren't as calm and were maybe a bit more fretful about things, and having optimism that this is going to come to an end. Things are generally going to be okay. It is going to continue. There are individual problems, obviously, and some of them are terrible, but for the vast majority, this is going to be all right. So it was trying to drive that forward as well. It was one of the things that I found really useful.
And you were able to dial that up over the course of these past few weeks, whereas you mightn't have thought of doing that before.
Yeah, I think it's, you know what it was? It was the piece about, again, going through the B5, there's a bit about how it sort of explained where you were at in the various factors, but then how other people see that. So people are of a different personality type from me. How do they see me? Or, you know, so, or how do I see people that are of a different personality type? And just being able to understand that so that you were adjusting, you know, sort of adjusting your maybe natural inclination a bit and trying to be that maybe more empathetic, more being there with people instead of it being where I would naturally default to, where I'm comfortable with, which is maybe more on the numbers and the facts focused side of things.
Very good, very good. Well, just to remind people, there's an opportunity to ask questions and to vote as well if there are particular questions you like. There are about 60 people on the webinar with us this afternoon. But maybe, Michele, if I could jump back to you about, you've seen how beneficial it has been over the past number of weeks and months with the current crisis, but looking forward to what has been called by some the new norm that we're facing into. Can you see this being of help as you come to terms with the leadership style that that's going to be needed in these months and years ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. I can. I think the watch-outs will always be there. For me, in terms of, you know, we face into a very, very different method of delivering teaching and learning. And we were quite fortunate in that we were coming towards the end of the semester, the end of teaching, when the university shut down. So, you know, the next couple of months from here on in, you know, I'm on a lot of planning groups in terms of academic planning, in terms of reopening the university. Yeah. For me, I need to be very vigilant, you know, of myself to open my thought processes to the blue sky thinking, the radical ideas. So I need to ensure I have people around me like that, the facts and the importance of gathering them. But I think as well, you know, I really see, one of the things that I learned, like I send an email to the students every week, updating them on what we're doing and what we're doing, that we can't give guarantees at the moment, and that we might not be able to tell people what they want to hear, but that communication piece of, you know, being very, very clear and very, very realistic, and that, you know, you may well be selling a message that you're saying something that people do not want to hear. That's not something that particularly sits comfortable with me, but that is what's needed at the moment. But also, you know, in having gone through this, it really gives me heart to keep up the good stuff that I've been doing, you know, that this is appreciated, this is important. And as Alan says, to, you know, embrace and exploit the parts of your personality, you know, that work well in the current crisis, but to be mindful, not to give yourself a hard time. As Alan said, you'd have to be superwoman to be brilliant at everything, you know. Acknowledge what your watch outs are, you know, what you need to do. I think as well, one of the things from the B5 Plus, I'm naturally a very vigilant person, and that, you know, is a characteristic that has combined, you know, with other elements of my personality that is good in terms of, you know, looking at the risks combined with the realities and preparing for those, you know, and being very, very mindful of that, and to realize that other people don't look at situations from a risk point of view as well, and that is a skill to bring to the wider university management team, I suppose, as opposed to just my own unit. So no, absolutely, it's so helpful, and I think if anything, you know, the crisis, and for my personality, that suited me quite well. I think the preparing for the future, that's going to be a more challenging piece for me. So having this toolkit will help me greatly with that.
And would you see it being helpful if others on the management team had a similar sort of self-awareness and an understanding of themselves, but also of each other? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the great things, I miss the ALP so much, but one of the great things in the last time that we worked was that we knew where people were on the B5 Plus, whereas David and I worked with one another the first time, and we weren't aware of one another's positions. But I could see David, you know, he was the one that read all the appendices and the case studies around the fact figures that I just ignored. So yes, it is really
fact. Yep.
Very good, David. Would you like to pick up on that and for
I suppose
the future?
Just generally, I agree with everything Michele said there. So I suppose looking at it for the future, so the future for me, the new norm, it's really coming back to a fairly basic, a fundamental thing, which is about teams. So within our business, we've got a really good culture. We've got some incredibly great people, but you see, being able to go into the detail of the B5 Plus and understand the actual mechanics of what makes that up, so that whenever you're putting teams together, it's not, you don't have teams that are very strong in one area but have a real weakness in another. So I think that's something that we've tried to do in the senior management team in the business, is maybe more about good fortune and good management at the start, to sort of pull people together who have different outlooks and different ways of dealing with things. But now I think what we're trying to do is to look at the teams that make up the various different sections of the business and see how we can try and make sure that you've got different people who have these maybe slightly different nuances on their approach or in the way, you know, the B5 would work out, just to try and pull them together so that they're really effective teams.
Very good, very good. Alan, would you have anything else to add to that in terms of the new norm? How this
new
can
norm,
help?
I think there's a watch out if people are, in layman's terms, I say, cautious about change, or cautious but open, but want real facts. I was working not with an ALP person, but a senior executive in the automotive industry in Spain, who had done the B5 Plus, and we were discussing the new norm of Barcelona, which I have an interest in. And because I'm right in 5, so I'm very open to exploring these things. I was talking about the opportunity for, you know, a growing demand to respond with electric cars, because the pollution we're experiencing is great, and et cetera, and noise reduction, smell the flowers, hear the birds. And I said, your company, without mentioning the name of the company, is extremely well placed as a leader in electric cars. And he's left on F5, which means he is cautious, a bit close, a bit, and he very quickly, it was yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. And he said, yes, but it's too expensive. And I was able to notice for him, I would say, look, that kind of natural instinctive reaction would potentially close down the conversation that opened up about, well, how can we get increased government grants? Who do we lobby? What's the lobbying approach? Who do we need to speak to in the wider company to go forward with that? And it's just an example of how he said, you know, it's so true, it's so me. I need to be aware of that. I need to catch myself in the moment, because it potentially closes down the best new norm, or our ability to prosper in it.
Very good, very good. Just going back to one of the points that Caroline raised on Tuesday about principle really of limiting beliefs being a factor, I suppose, in maybe not supporting us as we aim to a higher performance. And is this a way of maybe getting beyond that, getting beyond the noise that's there in the way of who we are versus where we'd like to be? Does it help get behind that? I know at the moment, for example, with all that's happening around us, with the noise, the news and constant updates and people being a bit frazzled, there can be a lot of noise around there that you're reacting to or responding to. How can this help with that?
Well, I think there's limited beliefs. I think it's got different bases and throughout our human characteristics. There's one connection with, again, going back to being left on factor 5, which will translate into being familiar with the norm, the traditional, the status quo. And sometimes the status quo and the acceptance of the status quo can mean that we, if you like, are bound by it, and that can make us bound by a limiting belief. And in this example, just to continue for a second, the same chap was saying, well, you could talk to another part of the company. And he said, well, they never listened to us. There's no point. And very much the limiting belief was that I, head of my area, could not successfully influence another area for the greater good of the enterprise. And that would be, he was probably more disposed or inclined to be bound by that than a person who's on the right there, who would just be left 3, right 5, exploring the norms, pushing the boundaries, seeing what's possible, what if kind of questions come naturally to people. And if you are talking about an individual or a team, a high-performing team, moving there, you would look for and want to have, as David said, some component parts of that team who are naturally saying the what if question, naturally expanding and helping others who might be naturally more cautious, come with them on that journey.
With them. Very good, very good. Well, I know we've already reached our time here, so I'd just like to thank you each for sharing, because these are personal details about your own leadership styles. So, and you've been very frank, which has been great. One of the questions that's come in is about how one can actually undertake this V5 questionnaire and analysis. So what we've working on here is that we're offering this to alumni who have not already experienced it. So in the past number of years, we've introduced it onto the program. But for those who haven't experienced it, the coaches that we have on the program, and also Human Content, who provide the tool, have very generously come together to offer the approach at a nominal fee for our alumni. And then for non-alumni, if you contact us, we'll talk you through how to actually apply for and make use of it. So with that, I'd like to wrap it up and thank our speakers again for joining and sharing how this powerful tool can help you understand your strengths and watch outs in taking important leadership decisions, both for yourself and for your teams. As we say in Timoney, we have our purpose, which is better people, better organizations, better society. And I think I must thank Alan and his team for really helping us, particularly with that first one, better people. I think this is a great way of helping each of us to be better. I know personally I've gone through it as well, and it's been very enlightening and helpful to me as I work in Timoney, leading the next stage of its development. Before you go, just say next week's webinar that we have will focus on practical steps that businesses are taking to get back operational. And 3 more alumni will be joining us to share their experiences. That's Enda Quinn, General Manager of STC Trailers in Antrim, Salim Maguire, Group HR Director for the Queely Group in Kildare, and Des O'Dowd, who's the owner of the Inchydonny Hotel in Cork. Please do share your feedback on what you found helpful, or if you have any questions on it, do get in touch. And in the meantime, stay the course and enjoy the good weather, which hopefully you're blessed with too today. Thank you very much.